Hey guys, we're going to be looking in this screencast at maintaining safety participants and colleagues in a sports environment. For the majority of this presentation, we're going to be looking at things like leisure centres and stadium. So if you try and sort of tune into those sorts of things, it'll benefit you throughout the presentation. So the outcomes for today's session is we're going to be looking into understanding how to maintain the safety of participants and colleagues in a sports environment, like I said. Objectives, first and foremost, you're going to be able to describe normal and emergency operating procedures within a leisure centre. We're going to describe the importance of and content of staff training, and also describe the importance of check-in facilities and things like that. So, first and foremost, if you're thinking about leisure centres, the general manager and his team of managers on a sport and leisure facility are fundamentally responsible for running a safe and secure environment. They'll ensure that every member of staff receives training on how the facility operates, as well as 2 manuals that provide information on how every part of the facility should operate under normal conditions and what to do in case of emergency. These procedures are referred to as normal operating procedures and emergency operating procedures. The normal operating procedure provides instructions on how to deal with everyday situations, where the emergency operation procedure provides instructions on how to deal with minor and major emergency incidents, such as disorderly behaviour from customers or dealing with a drowning incident, things like that. All sports facilities, like I say, should have these sets of standards. These are known as standard or normal operating procedures. They set out the day-to-day operation of all procedures and processes. They help to maintain how a facility will run. They outline safe working practices and enable staff to conduct safety checks to help reduce risk and hazard. They also make sure everything is safe for the public to use. It's really important within the normal operating procedures to carry out health and safety inspections. This document contains details of all of the services that the leisure centre provides. So the manual will indicate any potential risk factors and hazards that staff should be aware of, and these might include things like known hazards, things like unruly behaviour, prior health problems, misuse of equipment, pool hazards, slippery poolside, things like that, not diving into the pool, and things like customers at risk, so weak swimmers, elderly customers, etc. There is a legal requirement to provide and maintain a safe workplace and safe equipment. The health and safety inspections are a means of monitoring to ensure that all legal requirements are being met, such as fire safety and the Safety of Places of Sport Act 1987, which addresses any specific areas and acts such as the FA Football Spectators Act. All organisations will carry out inspections. It's a responsibility for the health and safety manager of the organisation to ensure that this is done. Usually the manager will carry out or be involved in the inspections, but it's also useful to involve other members other than the line manager. As we were saying, the NOP has to have extensive safety checks. Safety checks should be carried out to eliminate the risk of putting the safety of people attending a sporting event at risk. A football stadium could carry out or should carry out safety checks in a number of areas prior to a match to ensure its health and safety procedures are in place. A pro forma checklist should be provided and should link directly to the standard operating procedures or normal operating procedures, depending on which way you look at it. Safety checks carried out include ensuring that fire escapes are clear, first aid boxes are full, steward ratios to spectators are correct, steward duties and rosters fully cover all areas and hours, toilets are clean, food and beverage stocks are adequate, changing rooms for players are clean, ensuring that fake tickets are not being sold, and also signposts cover areas that need it to show exits and etc. The second part is the emergency operating procedures. The Management of Health and Safety at Work regulation states that organisations must have clear systems, policies and procedures in place for managing health and safety in the workplace. By law, employers must display copies of the following: action to be taken in the case of a fire, how to raise the alarm, what to do when the alarm is sounded, how to call a fire brigade, fire escape routes, muster points, emergency exits, fire extinguisher points, fire doors as designated on the fire certificate. It also needs to identify the location of first aid point or first aid box, the name and location of trained first aid persons or the appointed first aid person within that organisation. Additionally, other things that need to consider is things like fire, customers suffering from a minor injury, for example a grazed knee, customers suffering from major injury, knocked out unconscious, heart attack, those sorts of things, how to deal with drowning incidents, bomb threat, emissions of toxic gas, structural failure, spinal injuries, how to deal with blood, vomit and faeces and things like that. So all of the more dangerous things that can cause a hazard to people's health. All stadium and leisure centres need to have some sort of emergency evacuation plan. This is designed to make sure that if an emergency happens, staff and customers can get out of the building safely. Plans will be made for following emergencies: fire, power failure, gas leaks, bomb threats, missing persons, serious injury, things like that. Like I say, each stadium have those emergency evacuation procedures, and I think the most recent example of this occurring was over at the MEN Arena with the bomb attack that went off. They had an emergency plan and they dealt with it to the best of their ability. So here's a little example of an evacuation procedure. So the first point, ensure all staff are clear about the evacuation procedures as covered within the emergency action plan. Staff training is absolutely essential and we'll touch on that in a few minutes. Second point, to ensure a minimum that all staff have taken part in evacuation drills in the last 6 months. The facility should be consistently monitored, particularly areas which may be unstaffed or solo staffed. When staff alone within the facility, support should be made available should there be an emergency. Usually we do that by having some sort of panic phone linked straight into the local police station. Look at ways of supporting less experienced staff with more experienced colleagues. This could be achieved through a buddy system. If evacuation would involve evacuating a swimming facility, for example, consider ways of keeping swimmers warm. Usually we use things like foil cloths. Make certain all staff know the assembly points, and if the fire is not controlled quickly, have an alternative assembly point if needed. The last thing you want to do is get people to gather together in an area that might be deemed dangerous further down the line. The fire brigade just have to move you on. Unfortunately, in recent years there has been the Hillsborough disaster, which occurred in 1989. This was the Hillsborough Stadium in Sheffield, where 96 football fans were killed as a result of being crushed against each other due to being trapped inside fencing used to separate areas on a terrace. At this time, football terraces were standing only. Unfortunately, the Taylor report commissioned after the disaster identified or caused the compulsory refurbishment of all grounds in the country, turning them into all-seater stadia, and that was the Football Spectators Act in 1989. To meet the requirements of the Taylor report, grounds had to adhere to the following safe procedures: better stewarding, easy to get to fire escapes, an anti-crush design of stadium, fire evacuation procedures, fire prevention systems, sprinklers, clear signage for escape, and all-seater design stadiums. Unfortunately, like I say, 96 people lost their lives, and it's only more recently, after lots of protesting that Liverpool fans were doing, that they found out that actually it was a huge cover-up and the police were to blame for it. They let too many people in, and then once the people got into the stadium, then they prevented them from getting out, and in the end people that lost their lives as a result of it. Probably one of the biggest disasters that we've had to deal with in sport. Really important that staff training is adhered to. Most centres will ensure their staff are up to date with their role requirements and that qualifications are up to date, either by running in-house training or by paying for their staff to attend relevant training sessions. Pool lifeguards will often be expected to attend weekly training events to ensure they're able to carry out all of the different rescue techniques. In most centres, all staff will be expected to have a basic first aid award and will be expected to attend regular training events to ensure their first aid skills are up to date. Staff meetings are often held on a weekly basis to update staff on any centre changes or staffing changes and so on. It's recommended that larger organisations should adopt a procedure of establishing a safety committee to oversee health and safety within their organisations and to deal with any training needs that their staff might have. Discussions on matters of health and safety information should be a regular agenda item for management committee meetings. And generally speaking, the more information on matters of health and safety that are made available to the people or the staff, the better informed and equipped they are to avoid any accidents and to make decisions regarding their health and safety. The last key term that you need to know for this assignment is the role and responsibilities of first aiders. First of all, the roles of first aiders when we approach an incident is to assess the situation really quickly and calmly. Then they must make sure that they protect themselves from any danger and prevent infection from themselves with the casualty. They need to comfort and reassure the person, assess the casualty, give first aid treatment and arrange the right kind of help, whether that be an ambulance or what have you. They need to make sure they get involved as soon as possible. They have some responsibilities as well. Those are to manage the incident and ensure the continuing safety of themselves, bystanders and the casualty. Assess casualties and find out the nature and cause of their injuries. Arrange for further medical help or other emergency services to attend. If trained, prioritise the casualties based upon medical need. Provide appropriate first aid treatment as trained. If able, make notes, observations of the casualty. Provide a handover when further medical help arrives and fill out any paperwork as required. That's all for this screencast.